how do we go through the process of figuring out where to spend time, energy, and attention when looking at our business? How do we align our teams and their specific work to the things that are most important inside the organization? The way that I found to do this is by deconstructing the business into small pieces. I'll give you an example. At Catalyst, name of our company, so there's two main pieces that we're looking at. What are we doing to generate demand? How are we looking from a sales perspective? And then ultimately, how are we looking at it from a fulfillment perspective? So 3 main pieces. So call this marketing, sales, and fulfillment. All right. That's for a small organization. And you can see how that starts to take up a big piece of the whiteboard. Now, when you start to look at it inside your business, what you can do is the same thing that we just did right here. You can break that up into smaller pieces. And you can say, for your business, how are you actually performing in each of these areas? Some of the companies that I've worked with recently who are in kind of the manufacturing distribution kind of distribution space, you could look at it this way. We sell things. We install things, we service things, we store things, we move things. 5 big boxes. Sell, install, service, store, move. Now there's some stuff that has to happen inside the business to functionally keep this together. So you think about admin and management as an example. So an administrative layer and a management layer. Again, looking at the business, we start to look at those components and say, of these, which ones are performing at the level that we expect them to? Which ones are not performing at the level that we expect them to? Looking at a quick dashboard to determine how we're performing against key metrics. And if you have any more than really one key metric, I think you're at risk of overcomplicating things. My recommendation is 1 key metric for each of these areas, no more than 3 key metrics for each of the areas. And what I like to actually see is some conversion metrics that show what happens between each of those areas. We've talked about that kind of stuff before in designing your business operating system as an example. Now, let's use another instance of an organization I've worked with recently who does some contract manufacturing type work. In that instance, they actually don't service, but what they do is they build. So these blocks, these segments inside your business that are likely run by functional leaders inside your business are the ones to focus on and figure out, hey, what are our KPIs? What are our key performance indicators to determine whether or not we're successful, we're making progress inside each of those areas? And how do we compare those when we start looking at leading versus lagging indicators and the specific handoff between each area? When you know those numbers as a team, you start to create better alignment inside your organization. And if you know those numbers, everybody inside the organization can see what they do, ideally within like 3 steps, directly connect what their work to the specific work that drives the thing that's most important or the functional thing that's most important inside the organization. Those are the things that we want to work through. Now, in a software space, which it's kind of my background where I did some pretty interesting things in the emerging and enablement tech space. We had a couple of different things. We had a product team that developed products. Okay, so we had product. We had a sales team that sold those products, sales. We had a marketing team that generated demand for those products, marketing. And actually, I probably put marketing up here at the top because functionally marketing actually goes not only from the beginning area, but all the way through to the success side of things. We had success. Back then, we didn't call it customer success, but that's functionally what it would be today. And then inside, to help make all of this kind of work, you had things like people, operations, finance, those functional areas to help build the foundation inside the business. My point here, take your business, take your leadership team. You probably can just organize this by your C-suite inside an organization and see how that goes, right? You take your functional areas of the business and ask yourself this question. Are we winning or losing? Are we performing at the level that we expect to in each of these functional areas? And if we're not, what do we need to do to address those things? What's our three-pronged strategy for each functional area, maybe from a product perspective? What's our three-pronged strategy to achieve results in 2026? How does that functionally align with what's needed from a sales perspective, a success perspective, an ops perspective, and then a finance perspective? How do we start to connect those dots inside the business? What are the key metrics we're looking for? How will we know going into the next year that we're set up for success, that we've got the right team in place, that we've got the right resources in place, that we're tracking the right things? We're seeing those conversions. Remember, conversions relative to leading and lagging indicators, and then the conversion metric, that we're seeing that data move. And the biggest mistake that I see is most people will look at this data in a single slice of time. They'll look at a dashboard which shows a single view of what it is today, what the numbers are today. Depending on your experience inside the business, you remember what good looks like and what doesn't look like good as you go through it. Know what your view is of good relative to those numbers, and ideally show how those numbers have increased or decreased over the course of the last, let's say, 30 days, 90 days, 180 days, and over the course of the current year-to-date type stuff. If we understand what's changed over time and how those trends are moving along, we can start to determine, are we actually moving in the direction, or are we potentially creating some risk? Here's where that can really start to impact a business. If we are unable to generate demand, that big D, then it is impossible to generate opportunities. So pipeline created. Without demand, you will not create pipeline. It won't happen. So you need to generate demand. Now that demand can be one-to-one from a sales perspective or one-to-many from a marketing perspective. It can be done through ads. It can be done through a number of different ways. We need to generate demand. So your demand leads to pipeline being created. That pipeline, once created, leads to pipeline being developed. Once that pipeline being developed gets to a point of a sale, it turns into money. And then depending on how you're recognizing it, it turns into revenue. Simplify your approach to looking at the view of the business. Break it up into smaller parts. Deconstruct it. Identify the lowest common denominator inside the business. Simplify this stuff, and then make sure that as you're working with your team and preparing for next year, that you get an understanding of, one, how they're performing this year relative to plan, two, what their plan looks like for next year, how we expect them to perform, three, where our risks are, what our opportunities are, and then four, get into their personal goals. And we've hit on that over the course of the videos over the last couple of days this week, starting with the Learn, Think, Act video that went live earlier this week on Sunday on YouTube. If you have questions around this, give me a call. If you want to go deeper into some of the tools, just hit me up directly, and I can share some of the process pieces and the thinking here. Everything is theoretical until you go in and start applying it. Once you apply it, it becomes practical. So yes, you can break your business up into smaller pieces. And if you doubt it or you think that you can't, give me a call and I'll show you how we can do that on the whiteboard.